Technology keeps getting better, and one of the most dramatic ways we can see advancements is through video games. We've been playing video games for a long time, and games just keep advancing in ways nobody would have expected like 20 years ago or even more. So we do this every once in a while. We like to revisit old games to just kind of compare and contrast just how much technology has changed. An old version of a game and the newest version of it, just to kind of marvel at how far we've come. So let's start off with number 10. Look, everyone's favorite archaeologist, Indiana Jones, has been appearing in video games since 1982 on the Atari 2600, but graphics back then were so bad on home consoles, you'd have to really use your imagination to compare the two. So if we're going to compare the most recent Indiana Jones and the Great Circle to something, it has to be Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. Let's back up for a second. The Great Circle, of course, is the latest big budget release. They really nailed the Indiana Jones thing. It animates Indy and his iconic weapons with so much detail. Like, if you were to squint, you maybe would think this is the real thing. The animation quality on recent games is really what sets it apart. Also, Harrison Ford's face here is something that like games can really only achieve on the latest hardware. Going back to the Emperor's Tomb, you get this real stiff-faced Indiana Jones. He might have all the right sound effects, but like his revolver feels weaker somehow. His whip doesn't have the same crack. And Emperor's Tomb is a cavalcade of everything Indiana Jones. Great Circle plays the classics too. Like, you know, both games take Indy to the Middle East. Both games feature a lot of Nazis, and both games have plenty of meaty fist fights between some shootouts. Weirdly, Emperor's Tomb actually plays fast and loose with history in a way that the Great Circle corrects. The Great Circle has period-appropriate weaponry, while the movies and Emperor's Tomb throw around MP40s before they were actually technically showing up. In a way, like in a weird way, the Great Circle is actually really historically accurate. It's actually a tiny bit less accurate to the history-bending universe of Indiana Jones games. But anyway, both games do start with this extended visit to a South American temple. Emperor's Tomb follows a same but different approach, while Great Circle just directly copies the iconic sequence from Raiders Ark. It's a recreation. So you have one here, it's this beautiful homage, a recreation of an incredible scene. It's impeccable. And then Emperor's Tomb is the best an original Xbox in 2003 can do.
This ought to even up the odds.
Next, over at number 9, who would have thought we would have got another Warhammer 40k Space Marine? And Space Marine 2 is such a retro throwback. It feels like an Xbox 360 era third-person shooter in all the best ways. And comparing the original versus the shockingly great sequel, we can see the level of ambition has gone way up. There are like two things we all care about in a Space Marine game: how many enemies can appear on screen and how violently you can destroy them with the chainsaw sword. Looking at the original Space Marine, it's still a small technical marvel. That it runs so well on console or PC with so many little enemies running around in big environments is really impressive. And it still has that visceral thrill when you blast through a swarm of angry orcs. This is a game made by the creators of Dawn of War, an RTS game. And this game has RTS energy with all the cartoony orky boys stomping around. But technology has changed everything in Space Marine 2. There are scenes of full-blown Warhammer 40,000 warfare, with thousands of enemies pouring across these unbelievably detailed and beautiful vistas. There are battles in mud and dirt. Then there are battles in gigantic cities across suspended bridges with hundreds of soldiers all shooting down incalculable numbers of these bug monsters.
My lord! Intelligence reports multiple swarms closing in!
Direct us to them.
Sending coordinates to your Auspex display!
Look, The Tyranids are a more faceless foe than the orcs. They're a lot less silly, but they've got numbers. And in a game like this, all we care about is the insane numbers. Now at number 8, graphics are important for one reason above all, right? Immersion. The right level of detail can make you feel like you're actually there. And if you want to feel like a real wizard in any Harry Potter game, you're gonna need a really good, detailed, authentic Hogwarts. The Wizarding School is depicted in the films as this sprawling castle, and the 2002 video game, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, gave us our first chance to explore the grounds of Hogwarts. This is a nostalgia trip. Like, just looking at this game again, man, I used to love this thing. And now, yeah, it looks rough, but like, especially in 2025. I know there's like a charm to the early Unreal Engine 1 graphics. The castle is generically castle-like, and the magic has these silly floating particle effects that maybe impressed some people 20 years ago, but Hogwarts Legacy, it's like whiplash when you look at one and the other. It does Hogwarts especially justice. The wizard school is depicted in full, and you're allowed to explore straight up, like right away. There are dozens of Easter eggs in every little nook and cranny. Obviously, it's a different time period, and Harry Potter, the man himself, isn't running around, but still, they really nail the feel here. Now at number 7, Tekken is the longest running 3D fighting game series in the world. If we're going back to the first game in the series, you might not understand why that is. The first game in the Tekken series is pretty slow. It's not good looking, and it's barely functional. The models are janky, the hit detection is all over the place, and the movement speed is like everyone is stuck underwater. This PS1 classic hasn't really aged well, but it was a viable 3D fighting game at the time, and apparently that's all you really needed to be a big hit in 1994. At least the games got better fast. I mean, the first real big smash hit, of course, was Tekken 3. The characters started to look more fleshed out, their models were more complete instead of these jagged messes of polygons and textures. Movement speeds caught up, so it was more fun to play. What's really funny, like replaying the oldest versions of Tekken, is seeing everything that hasn't changed in the many, many years. This series has been going strong. Now, look at Tekken 8, and the graphics are so smooth, but some of those animations are literally the same for some characters. The developers purposefully making their animations as stiff and weird and just iconic as the old games. Characters like Paul Phoenix finally got a slight update to their janky animations in Tekken 8, but goofballs like Jack 8 still scoot around awkwardly and look completely ridiculous. The kind of weird proportions are still the same. The over-the-top silly attacks are the same. They've just got more tech behind them. They've got way higher frame rates, more particle effects, a lot more work put into all the animations, and 1,000 more shaders than the old bare bones PS1 game. But Tekken 8 still, miraculously, shares DNA with those old games. If anything, they're leaning into the bad CGI aesthetic even harder now with the endings. We'll always be thankful for those silly Tekken endings, but I digress. Let's move on. Now next at number 6, you knew we were going to do this one. Final Fantasy Rebirth faithfully recreates scenes from the original Final Fantasy VII and expands on them with so much glorious, beautiful detail, it can be mind-blowing. We could talk about all the updated locations between Final Fantasy VII and the remake, but there's one location we need to compare. The first is the little town of Calm. In the original game, this is a tiny, sparsely decorated town your party rests at after the climactic events in the main city. It's the first town you'll visit in the wider world of the game. It's when the game gets much larger. And Rebirth gives this area the glow up to end all glow ups, really. Calm in Rebirth is like visiting the real thing. Instead of this crummy little square with tiny representations of buildings, we're in a bustling, high-class village with peaked roofs and a unique object in the center of town drawing your attention. Look, everything here is recreated to perfection, but Calm in Rebirth is also just so much more. You can explore the clock tower, check out a concert with live music, play cards with locals. This is genuinely one of the most impressive open world towns we've seen in a video game in a long time. Everything in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is just expanded and fancied up. Even the goofy march sequence in Junon now has this orchestral choir singing the evil Shinra theme as the villain gives a speech.
My father single-handedly turned a small arms manufacturer into the greatest company the world has ever seen.
That's a little too inspiring for a bad guy. It's weird. There's something almost comical about just how much they've glided with this one, and we're really excited to see what they can do for the final part of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Just make sure it doesn't happen again, all right?
Now to deal with all the laundry that's piled up.
Now at number 5, Prince of Persia, the classic, took over PC monitors in 1989 when it was first released because of its brutal difficulty and smooth, unique animation. It's a really strange thing to consider, but more than 3 decades ago, the graphics in Prince of Persia, yes, they were considered impressive. Most games didn't have that rotoscope look that made like the jumping, the climbing, or the falling into spikes look so real. And the latest release of the series goes back to those roots. Not the, rotoscoped animation, but being a 2D platformer side-scroller. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown and the original Prince of Persia are difficult to compare because they are so wildly different. I mean, this is a series that has morphed and evolved so many times. What makes a Prince of Persia game feel like a Prince of Persia game has kind of changed. Most modern gamers of a certain age will remember Prince more for Sands of Time than that old original game, but Lost Crown still has those freaking spikes. Exploration is another important part of Lost Crown, much like the original game, but the game is split into Metroidvania zones instead of distinct levels, and you're not forced into like a sweat-inducing time limit before you can beat the game. For being a throwback, Lost Crown also has some extremely cool modern features like the ability to save screenshots to your map to look at later. That's a feature we wish we had for a lot of old school games like the original Prince of Persia. We had to settle for, pencil and paper for these things. But still, when you look at Lost Crown and you look at that original Prince of Persia, and either way, you just see a cool, adventurous guy jumping over spiky pits. I don't know, it just really hits us emotionally. It's like, damn, we have come a long way. Now at number 4, the long-running Armored Core series made a surprising return in 2024. It was awesome, but the mech combat games first appeared back in 1997. The original Armored Core is from a time before the developers from Software were really known. They weren't the Dark Souls guys yet, so Armored Core comes from a very different point in the company's history, when they were kind of throwing different genres at the wall to see what really sticks. Armored Core latched on because it had that slick mech combat, and replaying the game today, it's surprising how similar they are. while the graphics have been improved greatly, obviously, since the original Armored Core 6 retains like this bleak, dark ruins aesthetic that was even present in that original game. The menus where you select arms for your mech, the disembodied voices, and the detached nature of like the story all shine through in that original game. It's primitive in comparison to the, incredible action and particle effects and crazy weapons and the somber vistas and beauty of Armored Core 6, yes, but it's really surprising how much the aesthetic of these games were really locked in from the start. That's just focus. The only thing that really jumps out is the blaring techno music in the original Armored Core. I mean, it was the 90s. Every game needed this type of music, but you bet your ass Armored Core 6 doesn't really have it like that. Now down at number 3, Baldur's Gate 3. It's a miracle of a video game. We've talked about it a million times at this point. It's one of the most dense, richly detailed RPGs in recent memory. And I mean, it's an incredible graphical achievement too. Every line is voiced and mocapped to feel unique. The game is third person and a top-down perspective, but like you can freely move the camera around and just see how detailed everything is, especially the city of Baldur's Gate. It's insane. It's almost hard to go back to the original Baldur's Gate, which was more of a traditional CRPG when it released back in 1998. Baldur's Gate is exactly what you'd expect, really, from an RPG at that time. You'd command a party of colorful characters, fight in these tactical battles, and complete side quests while working through this pretty engaging main story. Baldur's Gate 1 did, the standard CRPG formula extremely well, and many games followed in its footsteps. We wouldn't have Planescape Torment without Baldur's Gate. Like other 2D RPGs, that you're locked in this godlike perspective in Baldur's Gate with each conversation just presented in text boxes. That's one difference some purists may actually prefer. The conversations and dialogue trees in Baldur's Gate are longer, more elaborate, and just more writerly than the more short, quippy conversations in Baldur's Gate 3. There's just a lot more reading to do in the original games. Like, even if you're comparing graphics here side by side, there's just a shit ton of text boxes. The combination of written explanations to things and simple graphics just let us more freely imagine. Baldur's Gate 3 shows us everything. Instead of imagining the results of a skill check, we actually get to see our characters jump around or smash the environment or talk to a weird creature. Seeing it all in lavish detail is everything we ever wanted, and we don't take it for granted. Now at number 2, Black Ops has become like the marquee series for Call of Duty, really. These are the best we can hope for from a Call of Duty adventure. And the Black Ops games really push the limits of what a Call of Duty game can be. The original Black Ops still looks great for an Xbox 360 era game, with these really awesome big set pieces and then infamous scenes like, remembering the numbers, Mason.
Damn it! Why can't you remember? Reznov's dead, Mason. Did you hear me? He's dead! Weaver's right. We're out of time. The Russians f***ed you up. I know you. You're not a traitor.
It's the kind of dialogue we'll never stop shouting, and the twisty mind control plot suddenly made Call of Duty storylines more interesting. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is everything the original game was, but more. It's surprising how similar these two games are. The only thing that's really changed is the scope. Black Ops 6 gives you these sprawling, huge missions with stealth and vehicle sequences and mini-games and more to break up the monotony of just shooting a bunch of dudes.
You trick this lowrider out with anything else?
I did install a short-range taser. Not very powerful, but strong enough to stun. Case, look. Adler, in the cell.
How much more time do they need in there? I don't know, but something's going on in the front. Someone playing hero. We gotta wrap this up before some real muscle arrives.
The original Black Ops did the same thing, but just look at the insane detail in Black Ops 6. The escape from the cops at the end of a tense infiltration mission in DC is one of the most impressive moments in the game. And later, you'll have to explore a vast desert open world map that would have been impossible to implement in the older games. Now, one thing that's worth comparing are the infamous zombie maps. And looking at Black Ops 6, we've got more zombies, more colorful locations, more weirdness. Zombies are so important to the Black Ops series. There's a full single player mission that's actually full of zombies mode monsters and bosses and stuff. The games just keep getting weird, and we love that. And that weirdness really started in Black Ops 1. Now down at number 1, look, we never thought we'd really see a true sequel to Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl. One of the most hardcore open-ended shooters we all struggled to play on our PCs back in 2007. This is a game we can't call stable. You know, honestly, the game was messy with weird bugs, but that's part of the charm. That was the whole appeal, and in a fun little twist, the sequel also has some of those things. But really, all that stuff aside, it's the graphics we're talking about here, and there's one useful location we can use to compare. Now, the opening area appears in both games. It's a totally optional area, technically, in Stalker 2, but you can return to visit the rookie village and sell stuff to the merchant in the bunker. He's just as stingy as ever. And there's something nostalgic about recreating a full area from the original game in the sequel here. And we can partially see why modern graphics don't always make for a better game. You know, in Stalker 2, the wasteland is this dense shrub of overgrown plants and trees and fog and gray skies. It's all gray, and what makes spotting a patrol of enemies surprisingly difficult on most standard settings. That one little change, and depending on your PC and your setup, maybe an inconsistent frame rate, makes things a little bit more difficult to play than the original. You know, exploring the starting area with fresh, cutting-edge graphics also has this weird feeling of deja vu. The cordon looks exactly how we remembered it, even if the original game didn't look anything like it. Look, that's the power of modern games. They're starting to look as good as we imagined them to be. And Stalker 2 harnesses the power of modern machines to stream an enormous environment. The map is one of the biggest and most difficult to cross in video games. And one of the most impressive locations to compare is the city of Pripyat. In the original game, the city is just kind of this prop to run through. In Stalker 2, you can explore huge sections of the city, enter all the tall apartment blocks and hotels and all the memorable monuments and stuff, making the world just feel much more alive. Graphics aren't just about fidelity. Sometimes they make gameplay a lot more interesting. Instead of segmented maps with loading screens, Stalker 2 lets us live that full Stalker exploration wasteland experience. That's 10, but I do have one more for you, a quick bonus. If you want to really see how far graphics have come, just look at a few seconds of Test Drive Unlimited versus the original Test Drive from 1987. We've got photorealistic graphics during races, where the cars really do look real. versus technically little cartoon representations of cars as you just drive on this mountain road. The original test drive doesn't have 3D graphics at all. Look at it. I mean, just animated backgrounds that aren't really impressing anyone now. The monotonous engine sounds don't really help either. Better graphics don't always make a better game, of course, like we keep saying, but we don't think anyone is clamoring for a return of racing games that don't have 3D graphics. We just wanted to throw this one in last minute because, honestly, when you hold up a new racing game versus an old racing game, they always manage to continue to push things further. And for the human eye, like the frame of reference of just looking at a vehicle, a car, we see them all the time in real life. It's the perfect way to really compare. And those are the modern games compared with their older counterparts. Like I said, we've done this video a lot, but we want to hear more examples in the comments. Some games you'd love to see, you know, put up next to one another. It's just graphical navel gazing, but it can be fun to look at how far we've come. Graphics aren't everything in a video game, yes, but they're a big part, and this was fun. So let us know in the comments what you think, any more examples that come to mind for you. If you like this video, clicking the like button helps us out. We put out videos every single day. So with that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.